Okay.
About that.
Yeah. It's sad. Oh, bigger.
We hadn't done his sheep of mine. Oh, got it. That's got a K-pole in it. I gotta find one that don't have a K-pole.
I'm
Still
good.
didn't get a cake. Where do you get them?
Hey.
It's a music shop.
Well.
Well, let's do 17. We'll fly. We haven't flown in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. 17. Sunday morning when the sun is over, I'll fly away to on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I live by I'll fly away. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to a land where joy shall never end. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, I'll live by and by. I'll fly away.
How about an 18?
18.
Ivory palaces. We're going to
let's-
the ivory palace.
Let's do another one. It has a K-pole too.
Oh, we do.
Yeah.
Does it take a special cable or just a cable?
A K-pole.
Doesn't matter what kind, a cable.
You know, if I could find my old one, I could leave it up here. I wonder if I left it here. Huh?
What happened to the other one?
You know, I got that red one, and I don't know what I do with those.
Did they always have cables, or that's something?
That's something when a song is too low,
Yeah.
you put it on here and it raises, it makes this higher.
Yeah, but
See,
they-
like this is, and a K-pole makes it like this.
Yeah, but
See, like higher.
they didn't have those originally back in the 40s and when people, I saw people playing guitars and I didn't ever see it on there.
Well, they didn't figure it out yet, I guess.
I guess that's.
They were just twanging.
That's just.
They were just a singing and a twanging.
That's what I was going to say. This is-
All right, we need one. We're going one that don't have a K-pole.
You pick it.
Well, you tell me and I'll let you know.
Well, you pick it.
Let's do Precious Memories on 43.
That's right. You know it doesn't.
You are my hiding.
Precious memories of seen angels sent from somewhere to my soul. How they linger ever near me, and the sacred past unfold. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever fill my soul. In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes unfold. As I travel on life's pathway, Hello, Mr. Paul Parker, we missed you.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Okay, we'll do 45. We gotta do it quick. All in the land.
What number?
45.
45. So ready for oil?
Yes, sir.
Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. Give me oil in my lamp, I pray. Give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. Keep me burning till the break of day. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King. Last verse. Give me love in my heart, keep me serving. Give me love in my heart, I pray. Give me love in my heart, keep me serving. Keep me serving till the break of day. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King of Kings. Sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna, sing Hosanna to the King.
Craig, will you go pass one of these out to everybody, please?
Thank you.
That's not something we're going to go over tonight in depth, but kind of goes along with what I'm going to be teaching. So I'm going to start by reading an article. So I want y'all to have those when I get started with the other. So I appreciate it if you don't read them now, because then you won't be listening to the article. And the article is kind of tied into what I'm going to teach tonight as well. Okay, Cindy, we ready? Okay, today is June the 22nd, 2017, and we will prepare ourselves in our usual fashion. We'll have a few moments of silent prayer, the option of rebound if necessary. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us this opportunity to be here to feed upon your mighty word. We pray that you will help us to focus and concentrate so that we will be able to be good and faithful servants in every exigency that we face, no matter when it may be or where it may be. You never leave us, you never forsake us, so we are able to be conquerors through Christ. Pray this in his name. Amen. Each Friday I get online and have a video conference with it's usually about anywhere from 18, 19 to 22, 23 pastors across the country that are ICE pastors. Charlie Clough is one of them. He's joined us recently, and he sent an email out to all of us pastors. You may have heard something about what they did in Canada here as of late, but this kind of a warning for us, kind of a heads up, because what happens in Canada often comes to the United States as well. It's just about, this isn't very long, but it's called The Parenting Discussion My Husband and I Have Never Had. And this is by Autumn Leva, I don't know if it's Leva or Leva, L-E-V-A. And this is what it says. I've always loved talking with my husband, but one thing that surprised me most in our 8-month-long marriage is how much there is to talk about. From lively discussions over the household budget to... You've a mystic way to put it, isn't it? Lively discussions over our household budget to negotiations over who washes the dishes, to choosing a home church. Since we're both lawyers, that probably contributes to the length of our conversations. We talk about kids fairly regular, and if we were to forget to discuss this, my in-laws helpfully remind us. We wonder whether our kids will love football as much as my husband, or if they'll defy us both and choose baseball, but mostly we talk about our deep desire for our kids to follow God and to love Jesus. But you know that, what kid-related topic never has come up. We've never discussed what we would do if the state took our kids away. It turns out this is something we and other Christian parents and future parents need to discuss. Up in Canada, the Ontario legislature just passed a law with minimal opposition that would allow Child Protective Services and judges to consider factors such as a child's sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression when deciding whether to strip parents of custody. I heard about this. Many of you may have not heard about it because it's somewhat buried like so many of the things are. Let me explain how this new law would play out in the real world using my husband and me as an example. Say we gave birth to a baby girl whom we raise in the church, praying with her and reading her Bible stories every night. We send her off to kindergarten and she comes home one day telling us she wishes she were a boy. My husband and I lovingly explained that God created her to be exactly who she is, that both male and female are made in His image, reflecting His nature. Our daughter returns to school and informs her teacher we won't let her dress or act like a boy. From there, the state takes over, questions my husband and me, and about our faith, and removes her from our home. We then enter into a long legal battle to retain custody of our child. For anyone who may be thinking that's just Canada, this is already being discussed in the U.S. For example, the Massachusetts legislation has a bill, SB 62, that would put counselors at risk of losing their license for helping a little girl understand how God has fearfully and wonderfully made her female and not male. And even worse, would label parents as child abusers when they affirm their little girl's wishes to seek counseling for unwanted same-sex attraction or gender identity issue. Isn't that a new phrase on the radar, gender identity? That has never been an issue before, probably in the history of mankind. But it is now. The most haunting quote I've seen from Canada about their new law was directed at the Catholic Church. Why has the most powerful spiritual body in this province, the church, not lifted a finger nor raised a voice to oppose this tyranny against Christian families and those of other faiths? The lack of spiritual leadership is killing us. We hear nothing but silence from the church. This has to stop, and that's all in bold, and that was the emphasis that was already added. We've reached a place where parents have to think about what to do if our government labels us child abusers because of our faith and takes away our kids. No parent should have to worry about this. Churches may be nervous or unsure about wading into political issues, But surely when Christian parents are at risk of losing the right to parent according to their faith, the time has come for churches to reclaim their bright lights and saltiness. May we as believers in the only one true God never be accused of being silent here in America. And this is my commentary. That has been going on for a long, long time. The reason we are in the untenable position as a country we are today is because Christians and churches have remained silent. They are AWOL. And then it just simply says, if you and your church are ready to flood a thirsty culture with living water, Family Policy Alliance and our network of 40 state-based policy groups are ready and eager to help. He has a email address here. It's mail, M-A-I-L, at familypolicyalliance.com. Mail, M-A-I-L, at familypolicyalliance.com. So we're at that place where they're already in Massachusetts putting forth the ground floor of getting this to be enacted in America as well. You all have this paper that I sent out to you. We're going to go over something tonight by Publius Hulda. And I got this, I don't remember whether it was an email or where it was, but this is very nifty when it comes to, let's see if I can bring this up here. I have it to where I can put it on the board and I can go along with you. We're not going to read the whole thing. In fact, I guess I won't read it. I won't put it on the board. But the top says, the Declaration of Independence says God endowed us with rights. By the way, those are inalienable rights, meaning they cannot be given away or taken. Now, someone can ignore your rights and abuse you, but you still have them. God gave them to you. To secure the rights God gave us, we the people ordained and established the Constitution for the United States of America. Notice it doesn't say the Constitution of, but the Constitution for. Then it says under that, wherein we, the people, created the federal government, an alliance of sovereign states associated together in a federation for the limited purposes enumerated in the Constitution. And then it just showed on the left-hand side, it says federal government in 3 branches, and on the right-hand side, it says the state and the people. And what it's doing is essentially is giving the responsibilities of the federal government in a nutshell form, as opposed to those are limited and enumerated, as opposed to the unenumerated and unlimited, except for the power that we as states and people delegated to the federal government. Outside of that, our powers are unlimited. And if you look at it, it says under point number 1, it says external. That's talking about the states, the people delegated to the federal government in an external, not domestic, but externally. The federal government has the enumerated power for international trade and diplomacy, to make war, that would be national defense, and make treaties, but only on objects authorized by the Constitution. Do you see anything on there about foreign aid? Well, there's a lot of things, but anyway, that's their constitutional area externally. And then internally, they have 7 little bullet points. Establish a uniform commercial system, laws on naturalization and immigration, certain civil rights that they are to make sure are not abridged in the federal Constitution. Make and enforce only a few criminal laws, federal courts for specific purposes only, miscellaneous housekeeping, census, and so forth. And they may borrow money and levy taxes, but only as proposed and authorized by the Constitution. That's it. If you want to know what the federal government has the right to do, there it is in those external and internal, or you could go to your nifty Citizens Rule Book, and it's in Article 1, Section 8, and there's where it has all, let's see, Section 8 on my book. You probably have the same book, so I can give you a page number. Section 7. Five, 6, and I see 7. Oh, there it is. Okay. On the top of page 37 is Section 8. And you see how small this book is? And it takes, let's see, about a page and a half on a book this small, that the states delegated the rights or the authority for the federal Constitution to act on about a page and maybe a half on this size book. That's all they can do. Anything outside of that, they do not have the authority to do, and the states do not have to obey them. The states can ignore anything that we, as the sovereign states, have delegated to them. They can do that and no more. But of course, we have a grotesque monstrosity of a Leviathan centralized federal government that essentially does just about anything they want, anything they can get by with. Okay, so you have that. I thought you might just want to keep that, put it in your Bible. You can refer to it from time to time, or you can fold it up small enough to go in here, because that's what it's talking about. All this is saying is that is the very limited and few and specific authorities or power that we have delegated to the federal government. And we're going to start here tonight. And you can see it's in big letters here. This is lesson number 9 on our review. How do we get rid of Obamacare? And then it says nullify. This is by Publius Hulda again, and we can learn so much from just going over this. This is, she used this particular issue to teach and to clarify to people who are Americans so that they'll understand what they can hold their representatives in Congress or in the executive branch, judicial branch, wherever it may be, hold them accountable. Now, well, let me turn this off for just a second. I want to ask you a question before we even get started this, and every one of you should know the answer to this. Even today, they're talking about doing away with what they call Obamacare and replacing it with something else. And they're saying we need to rescind it and then replace it. Rescind and replace. I'm all for the rescind part.
Right.
But any of us would have to do is ask any of the congressmen and senators that are in there and they're going through all this, I've got a question. Where in the Constitution and the enumerated rights does it say anything about health care for the states? Is that hard? Is that difficult? Have you ever heard anyone on the news ever ask that question? And yet that is exactly the question that is pertinent. And they're struggling, and they're going to continue to struggle because the federal government has no business, no authority, no power at all to do anything with the insurance of people in the states. And why? Or let me ask you this. If the federal government does not have the authority to do that, who does? The states. This is a state issue. Marriage is a state issue. And 1,000 others that we are up to here with the federal government trying to dictate to the states what it's going to be, and they have no legitimate, lawful authority to do it. I think the states could do it much better. But we have this idea that, well, the federal government When they speak, it's for everybody and we can be unified. No, that's how a dictator works. If it's turned over to the states, each individual state could handle it however they wanted to because every state is sovereign. Every state is essentially its own nation, except for the powers that we have granted to a federal government for particular reasons. So you may have some states that come up with a really good insurance plan. And the more freedom that they give, the more they'll have better insurance. But what if a neighboring state over here has a horrible one? Is that okay? Of course it's okay. That's what freedom does. So if you're living in the state that has the insurance policies that stink us, what are a lot of people going to do? They're going to move. Hey, how about that? And they can move to the state that has a better insurance plan, and the state that has the one that stinketh, they might wake up and say, maybe we better change our plan. Maybe we better make it more like the one that's working over here. That's the way it's supposed to work. But when there is acting as a dictatorship, a centralized government that is taking care or addressing issues that is not their purview, then you wind up with something that's a blanket thing for everyone and nobody's happy, and it shouldn't be that way to begin with. What puzzles me, does it ever puzzle you, how you have these learned, knowledgeable senators and House of Representatives, and you have all these people in the executive branch, and you think, how can they not know that this is not an enumerated power? How can they not know that if it's not enumerated, they don't have the authority to do it? And where do we go to find that? The 10th Amendment. All powers not delegated to the federal government by the Constitution, nor prohibited by the states, are reserved. All powers that are not prohibited for the states are reserved for who? The states and the people. Do you know how powerful that is? That right there says they can't do it unless it's got to be in that Constitution and give them the right to do it. And I'm just curious, why aren't millions of people demanding, I want on the air so I can ask this one question. That's the only question I want to ask, but it needs to be answered. And every person in government has taken an oath to abide by what that Constitution says. See, this isn't rocket science. It's not something that's, it's so deep, I need a lawyer, I just can't. No, it's simple. The Founding Fathers were more educated than we are. They were wiser than we are. They didn't trust man, for sure. And yet, since then, everything has devolved because there have been charlatans that go in and they try to change things in order to make it more a centralized government, which is the very thing that the founders did their best to keep from happening. A good example is the 17th Amendment. There was a time when the Congress had control, and let me put it this way. The House of Representatives had control over the Senate. They have no control now. In fact, when our last president was in, the House of Representatives sent 150 bills to the Senate, and one man, I don't even have to tell you who he was, you know who he was, just never brought it up for a vote, and so it was as if we didn't have a House of Representatives. That's how much control the House of Representatives now have over the Senate, which is none. But originally, the Constitution said that it was the House of Representatives would appoint senators. And if they were going to appoint senators, they weren't voted on by the people, the House of Representatives would appoint them, then they'd have control of them. Because if a senator got in there and started becoming progressive and liberal and that type of thing, they could just remove him and put another one in there that's going to do their bidding. They had control over it. But just as now, the media and the progressives, the liberals said, no, well, that's not fair. We need to be able to vote on the Congress. Well, that's what we have now, on the Senate. So we now vote on the Senate, on senators, and there's no control whatsoever. So what I just gave you as an illustration is how, over time, things like that happened over and over and over again. But because the people were ignorant and apathetic, they didn't care, it sounded good to them, and they were sold a bill of goods, and now we're in the condition that we're in. All of that is a prelude to where we're going to start here. How do we get rid of Obamacare? And this Publius Hulda says, nullify it. If you say something about nullifying something from the government these days, I hope you have your spiritual armor on and maybe a shield of some sort. People want to attack you because they have been brainwashed for so many years. They think the federal government is all powerful. I've said this about 4 times already. When Bill O'Reilly was on Fox News, I heard him say it 3 or 4 separate times. He says, federal law always trumps state law. It couldn't be more untrue. And yet the people hear that, and then they go out there, and when you say that a state governor can tell a federal judge, the federal government, the president, the vice president, the Congress, the House of Representatives, or the Senate, go take a hike. We're not doing it here. Why? It's not enumerated power. You show me where we've delegated that authority to you, and we will comply. In other words, stay out of our state or we'll arrest you. That's the way it was at one time. It's not that way now. Okay, so I hope that I've explained well enough that this isn't about Obamacare. I want you to understand that. It's using, what Publius did was use this bill, this law, in order to explain things so that we can better understand how government works. And why do we need to know that? Because we need to hold them accountable. Oh, but we're Christians. Aren't we supposed to love? Yeah, the way we love is hold them accountable. Okay, are y'all ready? Here we go. We are Americans. We are resourceful. When doors are slammed in our faces, we find another way. And that's true. America has been very resourceful and has ingenuity throughout the years. If you look at where most of the things for the last 200 years have been invented, it's here. Very resourceful. Since 5 lawless judges on the Supreme Court betrayed us by failing to declare the Patient Protection and Affordable Act Care, called ObamaCare, I feel like I need to choke when I call it the Affordable Care Act. Because 5 lawless judges on the Supreme Court betrayed us by failing to declare that act unconstitutional, since we may be stuck with Obama for 4 more years, and since a Democrat-controlled U.S. Senate will not repeal Obamacare, we must find another way. Now, that's the way people should be thinking. And then she's going to explain why. There is another way here. There's another way. Here it is, and it comes from Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence. Is he somebody that you think Americans should pay attention to? Shouldn't he be someone who's revered, that penned the founding document that set us free and on a path to having a country unlike any other? But what do you hear on the news today? Oh, he's a horrible man because he had slaves. And they tar him with a brush of infamy. And a lot of people, because they are ignorant, they don't have a clue about what he was like or what he did, they go along with it, and they would say, we don't want to hear what he has to say because he had slaves. That's the mentality today. And we have to get beyond that. Now, I don't know, I've heard some people say that a lot of the founding fathers were not these sterling examples of integrity and so forth. And I'm sure they had old sin natures, and they might have been womanizers or other who knows what they were. But I do know this. What they wrote that has passed the test of time is phenomenal. We're not looking at their private lives. We're looking at what they understood and what they bequeathed to us. And let me tell you, you're not getting any document that is superior to, as important as, or as phenomenal as the Declaration of Independence. All during mankind's stay on earth, as long as man had been on earth, it wasn't until that document was written did people think that the people themselves could be the sovereigns in their own country. Never had occurred to anybody before, and as far as I know, since. So we see what Thomas Jefferson has to say, and she has it. Remember, this I got all this from Publius Hulda. Nullification resolutions for state legislatures. Now this was, I don't know if she got this from the Virginia or the Kentucky resolution. I forget which one he was in. But this is penned by Thomas Jefferson. Resolved, this is point number 1, that the states composing the United States of America are not united on principle of unlimited submission to government. What is he saying? He's saying we don't unconditionally submit to government. That's how we would phrase that. But that, with the Constitution for the United States, they established a federal government for limited purposes only. That the delegated to this federal government only limited enumerated powers and reserve each state to itself all remaining powers along with the right to their own self-government. Now, that's just one short paragraph. How many Americans would you say, percent-wise, even know that is true? In other words, if you sent this out in a massive mail out to all the people and said, we want to know one question, is what this just said in this paragraph, is it true or is it false? What percentage do you think would say it was false? Majority of them, you think? I know if it was younger people it would be. Most of them don't have a clue about what their rights are, about the freedom. They don't know any of this. That whenever the federal government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Oh, okay. Well, what if you're a clerk in a government office that issues marriage license, and they come in, and especially if you're in a state like Texas or Kentucky, that they have the Defense of Marriage Act, acts between one man and one woman, and someone comes in and says, you will issue, your superior says, you shall issue, your boss, licenses to same-sex people. And you say, I don't think so. That's not going to happen. And what would be a good thing to ask next? Where do you get your authority to order me to do that when our state constitution says that that marriage is between one man and one woman? But see, what happens when you do that? You're stepping out of your comfort zone, aren't you? I mean, first of all, you're talking to your boss that can probably fire you. He works for the government, and they can make it much harder on you. But all you did was ask a question. And you know what happens so many times when you're in that position these days and you ask a question? They don't answer it. All they do is threaten you. Have you been in that position? Well, you better do it or blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but answer my question. Is that not going against the state constitution? He can't say, yeah, but what about the U.S. Constitution? Well, yeah, that's fine. Show me in it where it says something about marriage, and I'll be glad to comply. This is not hard, is it? Why doesn't everybody know this? They didn't teach it in school. But the documents are there, and I'll tell you one thing. Pastors across this country ought to be teaching this very thing. Is this not a moral issue? Is this not a biblical issue? So, whenever, this is Thomas Jefferson saying, and recorded by Publius Hulda, that whenever the federal government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and no force. That to these principles each state agreed as a state and as parties to the Constitution. Now I have this in yellow because this is really important. What he's saying that the principles that he's going to give here are for each state, and each state has these principles equally because it is the states that were the parties to the Constitution. Sometimes the Constitution is called the Compact. And when it means they were parties to it, it means all the states that were extant at that time sovereignly, as really nation states, signed on to the principles and put them in the Constitution. They're all on board. Here's what this says. That the federal government is not a party to the Constitution. What does that mean? What does it mean that the federal government was not a party to the Constitution? They didn't throw a party. It's not talking about that kind of party.
They didn't sign the contract. They didn't form it.
They had nothing to say about it. The federal government didn't even exist until the Constitution was not only penned and then ratified. It didn't even exist till then. So they had nothing to do with the federal government, did not create it itself. And so they cannot be a party to something that created it. You see that? So they have no authority. They have no standing. They had no part in creating what they are, which is the federal government. So, that the federal government is not a party to the Constitution, but is merely the creature of the Constitution. The only reason federal government exists was because the people created a constitution through the states, and then they became the creature. Then they came into existence. And as the mere creature was not made the exclusive or final judge of the extent of powers delegated to it. How could they be the final judge as to the extent of their powers? Because what is the overruling, always has been and always will be, the creator is always superior to the creation. And how can the states who are superior to the creature of the federal government, how can the creature dictate the limits of their powers when it's the states who created them? Who would you say, normally, just in logic, would be the decide who or what the limits of power was to the federal government, which they created? Who would you say it would be? The states, right? So as a mere creature, the federal government was not made the exclusive or final judge of the extent of the powers delegated to it, since that would have made the creature's will and not the Constitution the measure of its powers. What do we have today? It's the creature's will that decides what the limits are on its power. And what does that mean? There is no limits. What should be the limit? The Constitution. That as in all other cases of the compact, among powers having no common judge, each state has an equal right to judge for itself as to whether the creature has committed infractions and as to the mode and measures of redress. Now let me tell you what this is saying. It's saying that for the states, let's say for now we have 50 states, and it's saying all the 50 states don't have to be unanimous in judging whether the federal government has overstepped its powers or not. It's each individual state, because it is a sovereign in its own right, can say to the federal government, you've overstepped your authority and we will not have it. We're not going to act. You're not going to do that here. Now the state next door might be wimpy and, we'll do it. And that's the way it works. You understand how this is coming down? Number 2. Resolved that Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee acknowledges the principle that the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. Do you understand what that's saying? This is in the the Tennessee Constitution, that the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power is what? Absurd, slavish, and destructive to the good and happiness of mankind. Huh! Are you feeling better? Huh? I mean, it's like pumping air into these little floats, you know. They're just all wrinkled up and all. As you hear these principles, and it fills you with what we're supposed to be doing and the freedom that we should have, it's like just pumping air. It's like getting oxygen into a corpse. Number 3, resolved that in the Constitution of the United States, the people, capital P, ordained and established a federation of sovereign states which united only for limited purposes enumerated in the Constitution. And now he's saying something. National defense, international commerce and relations, and domestically the creation of a uniform commercial system, weights and measures, patents and copyrights, a monetary system based on gold and silver, that went out with Roosevelt, bankruptcy laws, mail delivery, and road building. We're talking about what our federal government has the right to do. That's it in one sentence. That the 10th Amendment to the Constitution also declares that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively and are to the people. And I'm surprised he didn't put a capital P there. That might have been a typo. That nowhere in the Constitution of the United States was any power granted to Congress to make laws respecting the medical care of the people, and that nowhere in the Constitution are powers over this matter prohibited to the states. Now, you don't need this in here. That's just, we're in a review. This is when it was on May 5th of 2016 when I went over this the first time. How many of you remember it?
Could I see the tail end of it too?
The what?
The last few ones.
Up here?
Yes.
Okay.
Slavish and destructive.
Do y'all begin to see how important the 10th Amendment is? And of course, the 9th Amendment says that if there's any rights that we didn't enumerate, doesn't mean we don't have them. We still have them. In other words, all these things in the Bill of Rights, these 10 amendments, actually they're 10 articles, they're saying we have all these, and we have more as well. And if you infringe on them, we'll let you know. That's to keep the government saying, oh, you can't do that because it's not, they could say it's not enumerated here. Well, we have others that's not enumerated, and we signed on to it, and you got to abide by it. That's why sometimes when people say, oh, well, that's not in the Bill of Rights, we can't do that. Somebody that says that doesn't know the Bill of Rights, they don't know what the 9th Amendment is. Number 4, resolve that Article 1, Section 1. By the way, let me turn this off. Whoop, 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 whoop. There. Okay. What does Article 1, Section 1, first sentence in the Constitution for the United States say? All legislative power is where? Reserved in the Congress, which is the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay, I just want to make sure and wouldn't you say that if you were going to write a constitution and you were dealing with the legislative branch, wouldn't you put the first thing most important? Isn't that what they did when they did the what we call the Bill of Rights? The first thing was the First Amendment, covers 5 items. I don't know if y'all know what it is, but the first one is what? Religion. They want to deal with what was most important with them, front and center, right at the first, and so that's what it is. So I just was testing y'all, seeing if you remember. That Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution of the United States provide that all legislative powers granted by the Constitution are vested in the Congress. Therefore, departments within the executive branch are forbidden to make rules or laws of general application whatsoever. And I would also add that goes for the judicial branch as well. And how have we been, when our past president was in, he was signing executive orders, and if the Congress didn't go along with it, he said, well, I've got a phone and I've got a pen. And the people said, what's for dinner? That administrative rules being promulgated by the Department of Health and Human Services, one of the executive departments of the federal government, to be set forth in Title 45 of the Code of Federal Regulations, and which pretend to regulate the medical care of the people, there's the capital P again, throughout the several states, are altogether void and of no force, as in violation of Article 1, Section 1 of the Federal Constitution. Now, why couldn't any person, any citizen, go before anybody, the president, and like I said, their congressman, whoever it is, and either read that to them or tell them that, and what could they say? What possibly could be their retort? I don't know, because I've never heard anybody ask it. I found that anytime someone, if you would do this and you said, these are null and void, they can't be, it's not enumerated power, they usually go to some statute or some so-and-so. If they do that, where would you go? In the Constitution, where would you go? What article would you go to in the Constitution to use to hammer them? Article 6, second paragraph. Remember? Y'all don't remember that? The Constitution of the United States and the laws made pursuant thereof, and treaties and so forth, are the what? Supreme law of the land. Now, here, let me ask you a question. I'm not trying to see how far we can get on this. I don't care how far we get. I just want to make sure you have it. So what if the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the states are sovereign? What about state constitutions? Or what about things in the states? If you're dealing with someone in a state, and the states are sovereign, superior to the federal government. So what if you go to a state, and you're talking to a government official, and let's say that, I'll just take the Second Amendment and say you have a weapon, or you're asking a question about a weapon, a firearm. And they say, oh, well, if you want a firearm, then you have to have a permit, and you have to do this, and all these other things. Now, the state is sovereign, but would the Constitution for the United States not override that?
It has to be pursuant.
Now, just wait a minute. Just think. I'm trying to give you a conundrum and help you think it through. Why would a state official, even though the states are sovereign, why would a state official have to comply with the Second Amendment of the federal government? Why? I'm asking you why. Because they took an oath to. Every person in state government, local government, it doesn't matter where, they can take an oath to uphold and defend not only their state government, but what else? The federal government. And so that is in the Constitution. The federal government has every right to go into someone and says, to states who are saying, just like in Massachusetts, you have to register guns. We talked about that, remember? Well, the governor should have gone into the whatever locale that was, Unless it was, I don't know, maybe it was a state issue, but if it was a state issue, the federal government does have power there because it was delegated to them in the Second Amendment. And every person in government takes an oath to that. So when someone tries to tell you something about, oh, well, you can't carry a weapon. Oh, really? Did you take an oath to the Constitution of the United States? Of course they did. Does the Second Amendment not say that we have the right to keep and bear arms? Is that not true? Why are you telling me I can't do this? And Article 6, Section 2 says the Constitution of the United States and the laws made pursuant thereof, and that's pursuant because we have it stipulated in the Constitution. So why are you trying to oppress me like this? Can you see? Now, let me hasten to say, I'm not telling you to do that. Everybody has to decide on what hill they're going to die on, if you know what I mean. I mean, if they're going to arrest you and confiscate your weapon, your car, and your house, and your kids, and everything else, I mean, you have to decide. But what I'm telling you, that is the structure that was bequeathed to us that nobody seems to be using, and it's still available to us. Now, I'm going to throw a little curve at you here, because in 68, I believe, is when they supposedly passed the 14th Amendment. And they will trot that out. Oh, yeah, but the 14th Amendment says that the federal government is the one that is to make sure that the states give equal and fair treatment and blah, 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 blah. That 14th Amendment came right straight from the pit of hell, I can assure you. It has 5 parts to it. The first part, what they were trying to do is punish the South. And what they did essentially in the 14th Amendment, which, by the way, was never properly gone through, and it was not properly ratified. It was not ratified. And there are tons. You can go anywhere. I have 4 different books at my house, at home, that goes in the 14th Amendment. Every one of them says it was never ratified. For one thing, they didn't have enough. The southern states said, no, we're not going to do it. And they wouldn't let the southern states be seated in Congress. Now, they had already been seated in Congress after the War of Northern Aggression. They had already been seated in Congress and voted on the 13th Amendment, so they had standing. But when it came to the 14th Amendment, they just said, no, you're out of here. You can't vote, because they knew they were voting against it. And finally, they made a resolution to pass it. In other words, the guys got together. We resolved that this passed. Now let's get on with it. Totally unconstitutional. Everything about it was wrong. So if anybody ever trots out that 14th Amendment, you can just tell them, not only was it not properly administered to begin with, was never ratified, and furthermore, if the 14th Amendment was ratified, which it couldn't be, because it is in direct contrast to the 10th Amendment. In other words, if they were going to lawfully and rightfully pass or ratify the 14th Amendment, they would have to get rid of the 10th Amendment, because it is at odds with the 10th Amendment. Who's telling people this? I hope you aren't thinking, oh, this is too hard, this is over my head. Our freedom depends on this. And as a people, as a nation, it depends. But what is a nation if it's not just a bunch of us, people like us? If we're not going to be educated, if we're not going to recognize what was bequeathed to us and hold the tyrants who break their oath to the Constitution and try to abuse us, if we don't do it, who is? That's why I say it's time for American Christians to stop being silent. You know, they talk about the sleeping giant. Well, the giant needs to wake up. So, The Department of Health and Human Services pretended to regulate the medical care of the people throughout the several states. That is altogether void and of no force and is in violation of Article 1, Section 1 of the Federal Constitution. How can the Department of Health and Services make rules, regulations, codes, whatever you want to call it, and then it has the force of law? A lot of people call it a law. Even if the Congress went along with it, they can't do it because health care is not an enumerated power of the federal government. And any Republican, Democrat, whether they are independent, if they are in a representative in office and they're in there talking about this as if it was legitimate, what are they doing? That if the pretended rules of this spurious federal department should stand, these conclusions would flow from them, that unelected bureaucrats within the executive branch of the federal government may force upon the states, the people, the medical profession, and the churches their own ideas of what others must and must not do in the area of medical care, and may force upon them their own ideas of what medical treatment each person shall be provided or denied. Is that what you want? Because the government doesn't give you options, they speak with force. That this spurious federal department will further send out swarms of officers to trespass upon hospitals, doctors' offices, other places of provision of medical care, and premises of religious institutions to harass providers of medical services, dictate to them as to what specific medical treatments they must provide and are forbidden to provide to their patients. In other words, it's the federal government say, you can provide it, you can't provide that. And the tentacles go very deep. To this abomination is added the additional affront that the objects of these pretended rules are altogether outside the scope of the enumerated powers the people delegated to the federal government in our Constitution. And that goes along with foreign aid and all the other things. And when you talk about, well, what we need to do is follow the Constitution, just end federal aid everywhere. Just don't give money away to other countries. Oh, but what would that do to the geopolitical scene? Who cares? Are we going to depend on the Constitution and live by it and depend on God? Or are we going to try to buy friends, as we have for about 100 years, try to buy friends and put our nose everywhere where it doesn't belong? 16 years in Afghanistan we have been. Can you imagine the treasure and the suffering and the lives that have been lost? And I can assure you, whenever we leave there, it will go back to exactly what it was before. Why do we do that? Because we're not following the Constitution, and the people are willfully ignorant. They think, oh, I can't do that. It's too hard to understand. How many people have read the Constitution and understand these things? And if they're not brought up by pastors across the country, I think that's God holds, remember I said that God holds the pastors responsible for blowing the trumpet. The enemy is inside the gates, and it's the pastor's job to alert the people. And they're not doing it. They're placed in a perfect position to do it. But you have pastors all over the country. Oh, well, I don't want to get political. And, Romans 13 and all that rot. They know not which they speak.
Are your ICE pastors?
Some of them are. Some are. That the departments within the executive branch of the federal government have established a pattern of unlawfully function as legislators when they write agency rules, as executives when they investigate and prosecute violation of agency rules, and as judges and juries when they decide whether violations of their agency rules have occurred and impose punishment. Thus, the executive branch unlawfully function as legislator, accuser, judge, and jury in violation of the Constitution, of the principles of separation of powers and checks and balances. And it's gone so far that today you have these agencies that they make all the, they're out there right now, they're writing all these rules and regulations that have the force of law. They have their agents go out, and now their agents are armed, like the Federal Land Bureau, and they go out and they force these regulations on the people, and when the people resist, then they have their own courts. None of these people are elected. They are unelected bureaucrats who are running the show today. I'll have to put off number 5. We're out of time.
Silence is not golden, it's yellow.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, for those online, maybe didn't hear that. Pete has he gave me the book. I read it, and it's by, who is it?
Tom Anderson.
Tom Anderson. And the title of the book is Silence is Not Golden, It's Yellow. And we have it back in the back there. And that was, what, 20 years ago or more?
Oh, when he wrote this?
Yeah.
No, I'd be 30-something.
In the 30s? Yeah. It's still relevant, though, because the principles are there. You can take those principles. Just like, how old is the Constitution? 230-something years. And yet it's still relevant today as the Bible is. The problem is people are lazy. People are apathetic. People are ignorant. And they are afraid. I think more than anything else, what is motivating people to lose their freedom is fear. They don't want to get involved. It could get messy, so let's just comply. But what the pastors are not telling them, what I gave you last Tuesday, is that God holds the people responsible when they comply to the evil of their leaders, whether it's a king or whether it's a president. God is going to hold them responsible, and I gave you about a half a dozen examples and pointed them out in the Bible. What pastors are telling their congregations, if you keep silent and you don't raise your voice and fight and stand firm for truth and fight evil, then you don't have to worry about the government. You better worry about God, because He's the one that is going to hold you accountable, as we saw in the Bible. Let's close. Father, thank you for this time that we can look at these deep issues. These are so important for us. It just makes us want to cry when we see so many people who don't care. They got other things, better things to do. Watch the idiot box. And stay out of anything that might be controversial. And don't get involved. And go along to get along. That's what we see across the board. But we, in our own souls, can be good and faithful servants. We can trust in you to protect us and not fear. We're not talking about defiance and being haughty. We're just talking about standing up for what is right. We pray that you will help us all to learn and grow in the Bible, in the founding documents, so that we can be free indeed. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Yeah, we'll send it.
Jeremiah 15 is a danger.
Do what?
Jeremiah 15 is
Yeah. That's the
danger.
one where Manasseh was a horrible leader. He's 6 ways God's going to make the people of Israel a horror to the nations because of what King Manasseh did.
That contradicts that Romans verse completely.
Well, no,
The way they
the way that they misrepresent it. But it's in harmony with it, but they misrepresent it. You know, what's the easiest thing to do is nothing. And so people go and they say, oh, Romans 13, you got to obey the government. Okay, that's good. I don't have to do anything. Only that's not what it says. There are conditions upon which we obey. You have a minute? I hope it just be a minute. Get on
Just set it on that chair. Just set it on the
I had a church.
That's my old Obama's forever. Here, I might have that Bible.
No more snakes.
Yes, sir.
Outside.
Well, radar man, you have the right thing for radar. Boogie, boogie. That's what it says. No boogie.
Drag on and drag on and drag on. And no one else. Yeah. Little door, yeah, oh, much better.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, let me just get you on real close.
It's okay, I need to do
Well, I'm gonna, when this comes up, I'm gonna click on hyperlink. And then we'll have to see. You'll hear it. It's really strange because I thought it was coming out here, I couldn't hear it.
Like the
Well,
plague,
so
possibly.
so am I, but I got to where I couldn't, my back.